The day I became the most reviled man in Willow Creek Estates was also the day I became its most powerful. It all started with a $500 fine imposed by the Homeowners Association for fishing with my grieving daughter. What they didn't know was that I had millions of reasons to fight back, and I intended to use every single one. My name is Ethan Caldwell. Until 2 months ago, I was living what many would consider the American dream. After 15 years in venture capital, I sold my stakes in several tech startups and retired at 42. But life has a way of reminding you that money isn't everything. Last year, my wife, Emily, lost her battle with cancer, leaving me to raise our 14-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. The grief nearly consumed us both. Fishing became our solace, the last activity the three of us had enjoyed together before Emily's health declined. So, when I decided we needed a fresh start, I searched for a home near water, somewhere peaceful where we could heal. Willow Creek Estates seemed perfect: upscale homes, good schools, and a beautiful 6-acre lake at its center. The realtor mentioned a homeowners association but assured me it was standard lawn maintenance, exterior paint colors, the usual. I should have read between the lines when she hesitated before adding, "The HOA president, Margaret Whitman, is dedicated to maintaining property values." I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd dealt with difficult personalities throughout my career. How bad could one neighborhood bureaucrat be? I found out on a quiet Saturday morning in April. Lily and I had been fishing off the small wooden dock for about an hour. It was the first time I'd seen her genuinely smile in weeks. She'd just caught her second bluegill when a sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you're doing?" The woman approaching us was in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in expensive athleisure wear. Her highlighted blonde hair styled in what I can only describe as the universal "I want to speak to the manager" haircut. She carried a tablet and wore an expression that suggested she'd just caught us vandalizing public property. "Good morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Just enjoying some fishing with my daughter." I extended my hand. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. We moved into the Maple Street house about 2 months ago." She ignored my outstretched hand, instead tapping aggressively on her tablet. "Mr. Caldwell, fishing is explicitly prohibited in our community lake. This is a direct violation of HOA regulations. I'm Margaret Whitman, HOA president." She said this last part as though announcing herself as royalty. "I'll have to issue a violation notice. The fine is $500. I felt Lily freeze beside me. "There must be some mistake," I said calmly. The realtor specifically mentioned fishing as one of the community amenities. It was a selling point for us. Margaret's thin smile didn't reach her eyes. "The regulation was amended last month. All residents were notified via email. Ignorance of the rules doesn't exempt you from following them." She turned her tablet toward me, showing a document with the heading "Amendment to Recreational Use of Community Lake." The date showed it had been approved just 4 weeks earlier. "We never received any notification about this," I protested. "I personally oversee all communications." "The email was sent to every household," Margaret replied with absolute certainty. "Perhaps you should check your spam folder, though I can't be responsible for residents who don't bother to read official communications." I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my voice level. "May I ask why fishing was suddenly banned? This lake is clearly stocked with fish." Margaret glanced dismissively at our fishing equipment. "Environmental and safety concerns. The hooks can injure wildlife, and we've had complaints about the smell of fish and bait disturbing residents who are trying to enjoy the lake views from their homes." She looked pointedly at our small tackle box. "Not everyone wants to see this sort of activity while they're having their morning coffee on their patios." Something in her tone made me take a closer look at Margaret Whitman, the way she surveyed our modest fishing gear, the slight curl of her lip. "This wasn't just about rules. We're being very careful," I said. "Lily and I always practice catch and release, and we clean up completely when we're done." Margaret's expression hardened. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps you don't understand how things work here at Willow Creek Estates. We maintain certain standards in this community. This isn't a public fishing hole. The residents who've lived here for years expect a particular atmosphere." She glanced at Lily, then back to me. "New residents sometimes struggle to adapt to our community culture, people who are more accustomed to, shall we say, different types of neighborhoods." The implication was crystal clear, and I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. I was about to respond when I heard a small sniffle beside me. Lily had tears welling in her eyes. This was supposed to be our healing placia spot where, for just a little while, she could forget that her mother was gone. And now this woman was ruining it with her thinly veiled condescension. "We'll pack up," I said quietly, placing my arm around Lily's shoulders. "Please email me the details of the fine and the full updated regulations." Margaret's smile returned, victorious. "Excellent. I'm glad we understand each other. And do check your email more carefully in the future, Mr. Caldwell. We wouldn't want any further misunderstandings." She turned and walked away, her designer sneakers hardly making a sound on the manicured grass. As we gathered our equipment, Lily wiped her eyes. "Dad, why was that lady so mean? We weren't hurting anything." I didn't have a good answer for Hera, at least not one that was appropriate to share with a 14-year-old. "Some people just like rules more than they like people, sweetheart," I said finally. "Let's go home and have some lunch." Later that day, after checking my email including spam folders and finding no notification about the fishing ban, I started researching our HOA more thoroughly. What I discovered was illuminating. Margaret Whitman had been HOA president for 8 consecutive years. Her day job? Owner of a small but exclusive real estate company specializing in luxury community properties. I also found several social media posts from Margaret herself, hosting waterfront parties at the very same lake, where she'd just find me for fishing. Many of these events featuring alcohol and loud music, apparently exempt from the concerns about community atmosphere. Most revealing was a clause buried deep in the HOA documentation. The lake was actually listed as a common property amenity belonging to all residents. There was no legal distinction suggesting the HOA had absolute control over its use. As I looked out my window toward the lake that evening, I saw Margaret and what appeared to be a group of friends gathered at a lakeside gazebo, wine glasses in hand, laughing. "So they want to play the rules game," I murmured to myself. "Fine. But first, I need to find out who actually owns this piece of water." The following morning, I ran into an older gentleman walking his dog past my house. He introduced himself as Harold Bennett, a retired attorney who lived 3 doors down. When I mentioned my encounter with Margaret Whitman, his friendly expression immediately darkened. "Ah, you've met our neighborhood dictator," he said with a grimace. "Let me guess she quoted some obscure regulation and issued a fine." When I nodded, Harold shook his head. "Margaret's been running this place like her personal fiefdom for years. Most people just pay the fines and keep their heads down." He glanced around and lowered his voice. "If you're interested in some background information, why don't you come by for coffee sometime? I've got quite a collection of HOA horror stories." I took him up on his offer that same afternoon. Harold's home was filled with law books and framed photographs of what I assumed were former colleagues or clients. Over exceptionally good coffee, he shared what he knew about our community's power structure. "Here's what most residents don't realize," Harold explained, pulling out a folder filled with documents. "The lake isn't actually owned by the HOA. It's owned by Willow Creek Development Corporation, the original developers of this community. They leased recreational rights to the HOA for a 30-year term, which is why Margaret and the board can set usage rules." He tapped